Friends of more, friends of the management of reality, welcome back. Today we're talking about the question, the empirical question. Is US policy pro-Israel or pro-jihad? There are different ways of answering this question. Um, you could look at geopolitical moves, right? You could look at how the US bosses project diplomacy around the geopolitical chessboard. Uh, but you can also do simple arithmetic, right? And that's what we're going to do today. So we've got the larger context is that we have these so-called America firsters, and somebody who has an America first position is saying something like this: is saying that the United States should not be promoting or assisting or encouraging or strengthening other forces, foreign countries, etc., unless those kinds of supportive behaviors towards other countries or other nations or other groups give a net positive return to US citizens. That's the sort of the abstract statement of the America First position. And when you state it like that in abstract terms, I have zero problem with it. I think it makes perfect sense that the people running the United States should be looking after the interests of US citizens primarily. Obviously, they're the government of the United States. Their job is not to save uh, 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 the entire world. Their primary responsibility is to the citizens who elect them. Absolutely. However, the people who are defending, or at least some prominent people who are defending this America First position, um, instead of complaining broadly or generally about US policy behaviors that are might be questionable in terms of what kind of return they are giving to US citizens, right? Instead of looking at the broad panorama of US policy, they seem only to complain about what they allege is US support for Israel. That's all they seem to complain about. And I think that not only is it strange that this is the only thing they seem to care about. If your position is America first, you should be bothered by all kinds of U.S. government behaviors that are expensive and that don't clearly seem to be giving a net benefit to the U.S. citizen, maybe to the people running the United States, but not to the U.S. citizen. There are many such behaviors we could identify. But people in the not people, some individuals very prominent in let us say in the media space as representatives of the America First position seem only to complain about Israel. Now we have one very prominent voice in this space that is Tucker Carlson. And so we've taken a look at him. We've published one article already. You have it right now on the screen. And so this is called, Does the U.S. Support Israel or Jihad? Tucker Carlson and America First. And so what we do in this article is we go into the way Tucker Carlson talks about Qatar. Because you see, Tucker Carlson seems to think, or at least this is what he says, that it is good for U.S. citizens that the U.S. has a pro-Qatari policy. So he doesn't complain about that. And actually, you could argue that the investments in Qatar are rather large. I mean, so the U.S. has its most important military base, its most important overseas military base in Qatar, right? That's the headquarters of CENTCOM, Central Command, with an area of responsibility that includes North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia. it's it's impossible to exaggerate how important CENTCOM is, and it's based in Qatar. And the Trump administration has now extended NATO level protection to Qatar and will be training the Qatari Air Force, in addition to giving Qatar billions of dollars worth of U.S. military hardware. Well, they're selling it, but the point is it's flowing to Qatar, right? And well, Qatar is one of the main centers of international jihadi terrorism because they're one of the main financiers of jihadi terrorism. For example, they're patrons of Hamas, the direct authors of the October 7th massacre. So Qatar is the intellectual author of the October 7th massacre, right? The U.S. is making a big investment in Qatar and in protecting Qatar. These are the jihadis. They're intimately tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. They're promoting terrorism in different parts of the world. They're attacking Israel with genocidal massacres. Is it obvious that U.S. support for Qatar is in the interest of U.S. citizens? Is that obvious? Because, I mean, what jihadis say is that they want to destroy the West. They publicly and openly identify themselves as enemies of the West. They explain their intention to destroy the West. They hate everything that we represent. And this is one of the international centers for that ideology. It's one of the international centers of financing for these movements. U.S. citizens are living in the West, so it is not at the least we can say is that it is not at all obvious how U.S. support for Qatar is in the interest of U.S. citizens. That requires an argument, right? Now, Tucker Carlson never gives us this argument. He just talks as though it is obvious that supporting Qatar is in the interest of U.S. citizens, and he also argues, also without explaining why, that what he claims as U.S. support for Israel would be bad for U.S. citizens. All right. So we take a look at that, and as a first stab at dealing with these America First arguments, which are very strange, only complaining about Israel, not complaining about support for jihad, U.S. support for jihadism, and even in the case of Tucker Carlson, saying that U.S. support for Qatar is somehow in the interest of U.S. citizens, right? It's a first stab at dealing with this America First phenomenon, or at least as it is represented by Tucker Carlson and a few other people. Now, our second attempt, which we haven't published yet, but I'm going to talk about right now, is instead of looking at diplomatic chess moves at the sort of narrative, discursive, and also military projection of power in the geopolitical space, right? What about just simply doing addition? Just add the numbers, okay? Forget about the narrative, forget about the diplomatic moves, the declarations, where the military bases are. Forget about all that. Let's just count how many dollars in armament, in U.S. armament, flow to the how many dollars in U.S. armament flow to the enemies of Israel versus how many dollars in U.S. armament flow to Israel, and compare. And let's see what we come up with, okay? So the first thing I need to tell you is that in doing this comparison, I am not even considering all of Israel's enemies. I have restricted myself to make things a little bit harder for the demonstration I'm trying to make. I've restricted myself only to the enemies of Israel that are geographically close to Israel, relatively close, and only state actors, okay? And whenever there's any ambiguity over whether U.S. weapons that ended up in the enemies of Israel's enemies were intended to get there, right? Whenever there's any ambiguity over the intentions of U.S. policymakers, then I don't count it. I only count U.S. transfers of weapons to Israel's enemies where it is already documented in congressional investigations or in declassified materials that the policy intention was to get those weapons to the enemies of Israel. All right, only those are counted. Any ambiguity as to intention, and I left it out. So I have a bias to reduce the estimate of the dollar value of U.S. armament flows to enemies of Israel. Okay. Now, when I'm counting the dollar value of U.S. armament going to Israel, I have the opposite bias. There, I am counting everything that can be counted, and I err on the side of overcounting. Okay, because I don't want my estimate of Israel to be attacked as some kind of underestimate in any way. So everything that can be counted has been counted, and I even am adding armament that is supposed to be, let us say, physically transferred in later years, so long as the appropriation was made within the window that I'm considering. Okay. And what is that window? The window is, it goes from the year 2006 to the year 2025. All right. So that's what I'm going to show you. Let's take a look at it. All right. So what you're seeing now is, I hope that's what you're seeing. Yes. Yeah. This is the table that has the countries that I'm putting in the list as Israel's enemies. I'll say briefly why every member of this list is here. Turkey, because it has been assisting Hamas and ISIS and other terrorist forces that attack Israel, and there's seems to be no reason to wonder now why, because President Erdogan of Turkey has even now threatened openly to conquer Israel. His intentions are now out in the open, right? So there's no reason to speculate about Turkey as an enemy of Israel. Then you have Lebanon. Well, Lebanon is basically controlled now by Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is a proxy army of Iran, which announces publicly its intention to exterminate the Israeli Jews. So Lebanon has become basically a Hezbollah-run state, maybe considered an enemy. Syria has always been an enemy state. Now it is governed by ISIS. What I'm counting in the Syria column is the money that I can, the dollar value of armaments that I can document U.S. policymakers knew was going to the Syrian jihadis, or to the jihadis fighting in the Syrian war, Syrian civil war. And all of these are going to be justified in my article, so that you can go to the footnotes and see exactly where the sources are, what the sources are that inform this addition. So you can form a check on my numbers. Okay, I'm going to give you everything you need. Then Iraq and Iran. Well, Iran is basically now the controller of Iraq. So Iran doesn't really need an argument to say that it's an enemy of Israel. They announced publicly their intention to destroy Israel in genocide. So that's Iran. That's doesn't need more of a case. But Iraq, you might think, well, but Iraq is a different country. What's going on there? But it's not really a different country, not anymore. The U.S. invasion of Iraq had as a consequence that Iraq became Iran's westernmost province. So now Iraq is controlled by forces within Iraq that are proxy forces of Iran. Okay, so Iraq is now basically a province of Iran, and it has been for years now. Therefore, any U.S. weapons transferred to Iraq are basically being transferred to Iran. Okay, and as you can see in the table, it's a lot of it. Then you have Jordan. Now, Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel. So you might say, what am I doing including it in this list? But I am not interested in overt diplomatic behaviors. I am interested in things that are materially significant for the security of the Jewish state. And the Muslim Brotherhood has grown tremendously in Jordan, so much that Mudar Zahran, whom I recently interviewed, who is a Jordanian opposition figure, he characterizes Jordan as, Muslim Brotherhood central. He thinks Jordan has become the most important center worldwide for the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the jihadi organization trying to destroy Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood is the creator of Hamas, which carried out the most horrific terrorist attack against Jews since the Holocaust on October 7th. Okay, so 2023. So if Jordan is becoming basically a Muslim Brotherhood state, well, then it's an enemy, right? It should be considered an enemy, and all U.S. armament flows to Jordan may be considered armament flows to the Muslim Brotherhood. Then you have Saudi Arabia, which most people don't know this, but Saudi Arabia for a very long time has been the biggest recipient of U.S. weapons in dollar terms in the entire world, without a close second. Okay. I realized that in the period 2006-2024, Iraq came out ahead of Saudi Arabia, but you can see how Trump is correcting that in 2025. Right? Saudi Arabia is back on top. Getting a lot more. So is this an enemy? Well, I think unambiguously, Saudi Arabia has been one of the major financiers of jihadi terrorism, and it has certainly been aimed at Israel. They've been one of the major patrons of PLO Fatah, what we now call the Palestinian Authority. So yes, Saudi Arabia is an enemy. Saudi Arabia is a major jihadi force in the Middle East. All the speculation that Saudi Arabia was about to sign a peace treaty with Israel is something you shouldn't even pay attention to for two reasons. One is that Muslims don't believe they have to tell the truth to the infidels. There's something called the principle of taqiyya in Islamic jurisprudence, which I'm not sure if it applies to Sunnis as well. I think it's a Shiite principle, but the logic of it would certainly apply even if there's no actual ruling. I mean, if you've already decided that you're going to kill all the infidels that don't convert to Islam, of course you can lie to them. I mean, it would be absurd to say that you have to be pristinely honest to infidels, to dirty infidels that you've already decided deserve death, right? So any peace treaties signed with Muslim countries are meaningless. Therefore, and that's one reason to ignore all of this talk that Saudi Arabia was supposedly about to sign a peace treaty with Israel when October 7th happened, blah, blah, blah. Don't pay any attention to that. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true. It was going to happen, but even if it had happened, as we just said, it would mean nothing. So what about Emirates? Well, Emirates did sign one of those peace treaties with Israel, one of these Abraham Accords. And for that reason, for the reason I just mentioned, rather, it doesn't affect whether Emirates is included in this list. Those peace treaties are meaningless. What does affect whether Emirates is included in this list is whether it has a policy to arm jihadi groups, because jihadi groups, as a general rule, not only do they mean to, murder infidels generally if they won't convert to Islam. That's basically what being a jihadist it means. But these jihadi groups, they always decide that they're interested in the destruction of Israel. I mean, it's perfectly consistent. They always say this, right? And Emirates has been a financial hub for money flows to different kinds of jihadi groups. Okay, Emirates has functioned as a kind of a node in the financial system that is funding these groups, and its own foreign policy has been to use its own money to provide armament and training to different jihadi forces in the Horn of Africa. So I don't care about the Abraham Accords. Emirates' foreign policy is consistent with the promotion of jihadism. It is itself a jihadi state. I mean, it's a Sharia state. It is full of slaves, right? Those kinds of countries always hate Israel. So I'm going to put it in the enemy column as well. It doesn't get the most from the U.S. In this list anyway. The money they get won't affect the tally too much, but I think they deserve to be in there anyway. Qatar, we've discussed. Qatar is a big financier of jihadi terrorism. They're a big apologist for jihadi terrorism via Al Jazeera, which is the CNN of the Arab world, which is based in Qatar. It's owned by the Al Thani family that runs Qatar. And they're the sugar daddy of Hamas. So there's just no question this is an enemy of Israel. Then there's Egypt. Egypt also is one of these countries that has signed a peace treaty with Israel, but Egypt has been in breach of this peace treaty for a long time, and therefore Egypt has been at war with Israel for a long time. I guess the most important aspect of that peace treaty is that Egypt may not station troops in the Sinai. Okay, the Sinai has to remain as a demilitarized zone. And not only has Egypt flooded the Sinai with armament, heavy armament that would be required for an invasion of Israel, but it has been conducting military exercises in the Sinai. The so-called peace treaty that Egypt signed with Israel has always been a lie. Egypt has always been preparing an invasion of Israel. And the recent exercises in the Sinai are not even that's not even what created the violation of the peace treaty. The peace treaty had already been amply violated by Egypt's tolerance of tunnels constructed under the Egypt-Gaza border through which all kinds of supplies and armament and everything flowed to the Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Okay, that itself is an act of war justifying an Israeli invasion of the Sinai, let alone all of the armament that they have stationed there, plus the military exercises that they're conducting. So this is a list of definite enemies of Israel. It's not the full list. I haven't included Afghanistan, Pakistan, other countries. But as I said, I'm erring on the side of giving you a smaller number for the enemies of Israel, so that you can see just how dramatic the difference is going to be. Anyway, when you add the years 2006 and 2024, you can see to the numbers in the Trump year, which I'm giving you separately so that you can see that Trump 2.0 is producing continuity for a long-standing pattern, right? He is in no sense annulling or reversing the trend to send U.S. armament to Israel's enemies. It's perfect. Trump's policy is perfectly consistent with what has been going on. Also, notice that the period we're considering, 2006 to 2025, captures 3 Republican administrations and 3 Democratic administrations. So we're talking about a bipartisan policy. Okay, it's a bipartisan policy. I could have gone further back, of course. It's just that a sample of 10 years is quite sufficient to make my point, and I was feeling lazy. Anyway, if I had gone further back, I would only have strengthened the argument. Imagine if I could include in here the billions of dollars that the U.S. sent in secret to the Iranian Ayatollahs in the Iran-Contra scandal, for example, and things of that nature, right? So anyway, but this sample is enough. And when you add these totals, what you get is, I think there might be a mistake here. Yeah, there is a mistake in the adding of the totals. I just realized it's adding up the wrong columns. So let me remove this. I'll give it to you in a second. This will take 1 second. Because we need to have the right columns to get the right tally. Let me see. That's not it. It's amazing that I noticed it in real time. That is amazing. So we need to add this one. Yeah. Don't go away. I'm almost done. Okay, there it is. And now I'm going to share my screen with you. So actually, the number is going to be a little bit lower. That's too bad for me. It's going to be less dramatic than I wanted it to be, but it's still going to be dramatic. So now I'm sharing my screen. Let's see. It's going to be, here we go. So I'll show you in this Excel, if you can see that. Right, is that too small? Maybe make it a little bigger. Whoops. That's better. Okay, so this is 2006 to 2025. And this is Trump in 2025. Now I am adding the correct columns. I apologize for what I showed you before. And now, so the grand total down here, the grand total is 700, because these are the units are millions. Okay, so we have 781, almost 782 billion dollars. Okay, almost 782 billion dollars that the U.S. is sending in armament to Israel's enemies. And what about Israel? Well, let's take a look. So the figure for, I'll put the figure for Israel here. You'll see the justification in the article, but let me just put it here so that you can see both numbers together. So this is the number for Israel. It is 87. Okay. So this is, it's a little over 87. I'll just leave it at 87. So that's about something like 9 times, okay? 9 times more armament in dollar value is flowing to Israel's enemies than flows to Israel. It's a simple sum. It's not a sophisticated analysis. It's just, let's just count how much money, how much armament in dollar terms goes to Israel, and how much armament in dollar terms goes to the enemies of Israel. When you're getting a number like this, when you're getting numbers like these, it's about 9 times more for Israel's enemies than for Israel. That's practically an order of magnitude. This is a gigantic difference. And when you consider that the enemies of Israel have genocidal intent, this difference acquires a really powerful meaning. So perhaps it is not in principle impossible to defend the hypothesis that U.S. policy is pro-Israel, even with these numbers. I would have to hear the argument. I think that when you put this together with the analysis of diplomacy, the argument that the U.S. has an anti-Israel policy becomes crushing. But even just considering this simple addition, it seems that it puts the burden of proof entirely on whoever wants to claim that U.S. policy is pro-Israel. The burden of proof is on you, buddy. If you think U.S. policy is pro-Israel, you have to argue against these numbers. You either have to show that my numbers are wrong, which may not be impossible. You just caught me adding up the wrong columns in my Excel. So who knows? I might have made other mistakes. That could give you hope. But if you don't find really big problems with my addition or with the way I sourced these numbers, and the basic difference I'm presenting to you stands, then how does one say that U.S. policy is pro-Israel? But how does the argument work? Okay, if the U.S. is sending about 9 times more armament in dollar value to the enemies of Israel that say they want to exterminate the Israeli Jews, not clear how you're going to defend the argument that the U.S. has a pro-Israel policy. Be interesting to see it. But you're going to have to do it not only against these numbers, but also against the analysis of diplomacy, right? You have to argue against the basic historical fact that it was a U.S. diplomatic initiative called the Oslo quote-unquote peace process that brought the terrorists who want to destroy the Jewish state into militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state. That was done by the U.S. presidents, right? The PLO Fatah, what we now call the Palestinian Authority, which is stationed up here in Judea and Samaria, right? They were outside of Israel. They were outside of Israel, and they had basically been defeated in 1982 by Menachem Begin, when Menachem Begin, Prime Minister of Israel, uh, invaded Lebanon, went all the way up to Beirut. So they were finished basically after 1982, and the U.S. revived them. The U.S. presidents created a diplomatic process to revive this organization and to bring it inside the Jewish state, give it control over the Arabs in militarily strategic territory, Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, right? It was U.S. policy that did all that. And this organization that they brought into the Jewish state, which had already been defeated, they revived it, is descended from the German Nazi final solution. So if you go to our website, I'll show you where this is. We have an article on this so that you can learn about it. So, for example, are you watching this right now? Are you seeing my screen? No, I don't think they're seeing my screen. Let me try this again. How about now? Are they seeing my screen? Somehow they're not. Can you fix that? Okay. Well, you're on screen. You can talk to me. Okay. So the Wi-Fi is apparently not allowing me to do this. So I'll stop sharing. But if you go to Management of Reality, you'll see on the most popular articles at the very top, we have two. I think it's the first and third most popular articles. You can leave, Yoel, so that we're not putting that much pressure on the Wi-Fi. So one article documents how the PLO Fatah was created by Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was the one of the top leaders of the German Nazi final solution. And then you're still on screen, Yoel. You can leave so that we're not putting so much pressure on the Wi-Fi. There you go. And that, so Haj Amin al-Husseini, the creator of PLO Fatah, was one of the top leaders of the German Nazi final solution. Right? This is a structural, strategic, dramatic fact. This cannot be exaggerated. What the US government brought into the Jewish state is an organization created by an exterminator of Jews, a top exterminator of Jews, because that's what Haj Amin al-Husseini was. He had been killing Jews in British Mandate Palestine, and then he went to kill Jews for the Nazis. And then after the war, he kept killing Jews by creating Al-Fatah, which becomes the PLO, or which swallows the PLO, rather, and that is now called the Palestinian Authority. Okay, the U.S. brought this organization into the Jewish state, the U.S. government. And this organization, PLO Fatah, that we explained this in the other article that is very popular. You'll see it in the list of popular articles. PLO Fatah is the creator of the Iranian jihadi revolution because they armed and trained Ayatollah Khomeini's guerrillas when they had their state within a state in Lebanon before Menachem Begin invaded Lebanon. Right? Menachem Begin invades in 1982, so that's when the party ended for PLO Fatah in Lebanon. But before that, in the 1970s, they had this state within a state in Lebanon, and that's where they were training Ayatollah Khomeini's guerrillas, the same guerrillas that then fought the Iranian Islamic Revolution and put Ayatollah Khomeini in power in Iran. People don't remember this. It was explained on the front page of the New York Times in 1979. Yasser Arafat is the author of Ayatollah Khomeini's revolution, and PLO Fatah helped them create the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and other things. They were very important in the creation of the institutions of the new jihadi state in Iran. Right. It was the US that brought these people inside. So that needs to be added to the simple arithmetic that we're talking about. Once you put it all together, defending the argument that that the U.S. has a pro-Israeli policy. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do that. I mean, I realize that when you turn on the TV or you open any newspaper, any magazine, you search online, you listen to any head of any institution that has any kind of reach, mainstream reach, any university professor, any talking head in the media, any government official of any country, including Israel and the United States, they'll all tell you that the U.S. policy is supposed to be very pro-Israel. And the America Firsters are very upset about this. Oh, the U.S. has such a pro-Israel U.S. policy. U.S. policy is so pro-Israel. We're very upset. There's no balance. It's not. Why are we doing this? That is so against the interests of U.S. citizens. They go on and on and on. But whether you think the U.S. should be or should not be supporting Israel is a separate issue. I'm attacking the premise. I'm attacking the empirical claim, the claim that U.S. policy is even pro-Israel. Is that even true? Why? Why do people say this? If the U.S. brings the terrorists descended from the German Nazi final solution, creators of the jihadi revolution in Iran that wants to repeat the final solution in Israel, and at the same time, the U.S. government is sending 9 times more weapons to the enemies of Israel than it does to Israel, I think case closed. And everything that Trump has been doing in his own second term is perfectly consistent with the anti-Israel and pro-jihadi hypothesis. Perfectly consistent. Donald Trump's policy towards Israel has been Joe Biden's policy. In fact, before Donald Trump was even inaugurated as president, he was already getting done the ceasefire that Joe Biden wanted in Gaza. He got that done even before he was inaugurated. So Joe Biden couldn't get it. He couldn't get it. He was insisting. He was very upset. He wanted a ceasefire in Gaza because they're protecting Hamas. Hamas was getting its ass kicked. So they wanted a ceasefire. No. Couldn't get it. Donald Trump got it. Donald Trump got the ceasefire that saved Hamas. And then he got another one just recently when the Israeli Defense Forces were about to give the coup de grace to Hamas. Donald Trump came in to save Hamas again with another ceasefire. And that's just one example. He stopped Israel in Lebanon, didn't he? Just recently. Saved Hezbollah. Israel was advancing. It was going to liberate all of Lebanon. Hezbollah was folding quickly. After the Beeper attack, after the attack on Nasrallah's bunker, which decapitated the entire leadership of Hezbollah, they were advancing very fast into Lebanon. Trump stopped them. Same thing happened in Syria. They were advancing very, very fast into Syria. Trump stopped them. So he saves Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then he forces, well, he doesn't force, but he insists that Israel must stop, right? And Netanyahu always obeys. So the IDF forces stop in Israel, in Syria, and Trump oversees the installation of an ISIS government in Syria, because that's what Muhammad al-Jolani is. He is ISIS. And that's what Trump has now installed in Syria. And those ISIS terrorists, they want to destroy Israel in genocide. Trump stopped Israel in the 12-day war in Iran. He came into the war just so that he could impose a ceasefire. And look at him now, dragging his feet, doing the impossible to save the Ayatollahs. He's got negotiations going on. Of course, they will succeed. The negotiations will succeed because because the real objective of U.S. foreign policy is to save the Ayatollahs. And the only way to save them right now is if the negotiations succeed. So, of course, they will succeed. They won't attack the Ayatollahs. And then we have Qatar. We already discussed how jealously, how exquisitely Donald Trump protects the jihadi slave state of Qatar. How, really, how? How is anyone going to defend that the U.S. has a pro-Israel policy? Or because the U.S. moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? This is what people say to me. You think that counts more than sending 9 times more armament to the genocidal enemies of Israel? And remember, that's an underestimate, given the biases in my methodology, right? You think moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel protects any Jews? How does it matter? Other than to confuse lots of Jews who want to interpret anything they can as a good feeling from the U.S. towards Israel and cling to that in order to support their belief that they have a friend in the United States, or in the government of the United States, to be more precise. How is moving the embassy more important than a diplomatic process that brings the genocidal terrorists into militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state? I always tell people you can't pay attention when you're building a geopolitical model. You can't pay attention to the things that the people in office say. Because when they grab the microphone, it is to produce an effect. They're not informing you. They're not informing you. That's not what they do. They're manipulating you. They never say anything out loud so that you can understand the world better. That's not what they're doing. So don't pay any attention to what they say. It has no signal value. What you need to do is pay attention. What's up, Joel?
Francisco, this is a very good question here that I think it will get a lot of value. Here, someone is asking you, is the US going to attack Iran?
Well, no, I already
What do
made
you
my
think?
prediction. I don't think so. I don't think the U.S. is going to attack Iran. Donald Trump has been doing the precise opposite. He's been dragging his feet and inventing excuses and doing absolutely everything he can to avoid attacking Iran. People think, oh, he's moving his troops because he's getting ready to attack Iran. No. He's moving his troops so that the theater of pressure on Iran to get the negotiations done will be maximally effective. And so he will look like an enemy of Iran because he mobilized his troops. But in effect, what he will do is, or he will look like an enemy of the Ayatollahs. I need to be precise, because he mobilized his troops. But the effect of everything he's doing is to save the Ayatollahs. So he's going to get a negotiated agreement. And that's consistent with what he's been doing up to now. So immediately before now, what he did is to seem like an enemy of the Ayatollahs. He said, if the Ayatollahs start shooting on ordinary Iranians, I'm going to shoot them. I'm going to start shooting at them. And that makes him look very macho, and it makes him look very anti-Ayatollah. But what happened immediately after that is that the Iranian Ayatollahs started shooting thousands of ordinary Iranians. We don't know how many, but people are talking about tens of thousands. Okay? And the next thing out of Trump's mouth is, well, we're not going to move because the Ayatollahs told me that they're not killing that many people anymore, and they're not going to have the executions. They stopped the executions. So we're not going to attack them at this point. It's ridiculous. There's no imaginable scenario that I can think of where the Iranian Ayatollahs have given Donald Trump more excuses, more actionable excuses for him to attack them. This is a terrorist jihadi state founded on the ideology that they're going to destroy the state of Israel and the United States of America. They have state-sponsored rituals in which their followers chant "Death to America, the great Satan." And they have been funding terrorist forces around the world that kill innocent people. And now they're shooting at their own people when their people are protesting, demanding that they step down. This is a perfect grammatical scenario for Trump to attack the Ayatollahs. And in addition to the grammatical perfection that has been laid out before him, he has military perfection, because Israel already demonstrated that they can act freely over Iranian airspace. So in the 12-day war, Iran was unable to shoot down even one Israeli jet fighter. So we already know they can't protect themselves. Trump doesn't even have to do the job himself. He can just let the Israelis attack the Iranians. Let them do it. He doesn't have to do anything. So he can get rid of the Ayatollahs for free. The Ayatollahs have given him all the excuses possible. They have laid the grammatical table for him, right? And still he doesn't want to attack, nor does he allow Israel to attack. And if you go a little bit further back, you will see that the 12-day war behavior is consistent with this. So he was pleading with the Ayatollahs to come back to the negotiating table so that he could stop the Israelis while the 12-day war was going. And when the Ayatollahs couldn't do that, he came into the war, dropped a few bombs, took narrative control of the war, and then he stopped the Israelis. You see? That's why he dropped those few bombs. He needed to take narrative control of the war, because if he didn't do that, he couldn't stop the Israelis. And if he couldn't stop the Israelis, he couldn't save the Ayatollahs, which in fact he said was his goal. He said he was trying to save the Iranian Empire. He said that in one of his Truth Social posts. So no, as I've predicted in other spaces, I don't think the U.S. is going to attack Iran. My prediction is that they won't. They're trying very hard to save the Ayatollahs. I made this prediction back in 2006, by the way. We should put that article that from my other website, from Historical and Investigative Research, in the description, Yoel, please, when we're done. But back in 2006, I published a piece called "Will the U.S. Attack Iran? An Alternative Hypothesis," because at the time of that article, we were in the middle of one of these recurrent bouts of heated speculation over whether the U.S. is about to attack Iran, just like we are now. And this happens every so many months or so. It's been happening for half a century. And the U.S. never attacks Iran. So in one of these, I said to myself, well, I got my model. I've got the basic outline of my model put together. I believe it's right. So I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to make a prediction. So I wrote this article that said, no, the U.S. is not going to attack Iran. Remember, this is back in 2006. I said, no, the U.S. is not going to attack Iran. They won't do it now. They will never do it. Unless attacking Iran is bad for Israel. That's the only condition in which they will do it. And that prediction was, so the double prediction was borne out in the years that came, in the years that passed since that prediction. The U.S. did not attack Iran. And recently, when the U.S. did attack Iran, it was to stop Israel from destroying the Ayatollahs. So the prediction that the only condition in which the US would attack Iran is if that was bad for Israel, that came true exactly. And that's the kind of prediction only my model can make. I mean, if you believe that the US is in some way pro-Israel, I mean, this business with Iran makes it very clear. I mean, the Ayatollahs are very bad for ordinary Iranians. They're very, very bad for Israel. Obviously, they want to destroy Israel in genocide. And the as I said, the grammatical excuse and the military opportunity are optimal. So the fact that Trump is making this gigantic effort to save the Ayatollahs is a behavior that only my model can explain, because my model says that U.S. policy in the Middle East is actually pro-jihadi and anti-Israel. U.S. policy has been to strengthen the jihadis that want to commit genocide in Israel. All right. Now think back to Iran-Contra, because that's a diagnostic fact that only my theory can explain. Again, because it's not like, I mean, I only need one, but I have a whole mountain of them. Iran-Contra was the Reagan administration sending billions of dollars in armament in secret to the same Ayatollahs that Trump is trying to save. They've been perfectly consistent over the years. That's back in the 1980s. The jihadi regime had just been formed. Okay. And Ronald Reagan took power on the coattails of a presidential campaign whose main theme was that he was going to beat the crap out of the Ayatollahs. That was his whole presidential campaign, accusing Jimmy Carter of being too timid, too cowardly, won't stand up to the Iranian Ayatollahs. I'm going to show him. You know, he was John Wayne coming to the White House. And the minute he was elected, the minute he sat his ass in the Oval Office, Ronald Reagan started sending billions of dollars in weapons to the Ayatollah Khomeini. When they caught him, he said it was because he was trying to save the lives of 5 hostages in Lebanon that had been taken by Hezbollah. So the official argument became, oh, you know, I was sending billions of dollars to Ayatollah Khomeini to see if he would beg Hezbollah, which is a creation of Khomeini, to release a handful of hostages they had taken in Lebanon. It's ridiculous. And the more important problem with this explanation is that Reagan authorized the first secret arms transfers to Iran in 1981, and there were no hostages in Lebanon in 1981. The first hostage was taken in 1982. And that was explained in a Seymour Hersh article on the front page of the New York Times in 1991. It's called the Iran Pipeline. You can go look it up. And Seymour Hersh made this point. He said, look, we now have several investigations that have shown that the arms transfers, the Reagan secret arms transfers to Khomeini, began in 1981, whereas the first hostage was taken in 1982. And so Seymour Hersh says, therefore, no American rationale for the arms transfers to Iran could be established. Just, well, in that case, we just don't know why it happened. And he just gave up. You know, the media stopped when it became obvious that the official explanation was a lot of propaganda and it couldn't be anything but a lie. Then they stopped that. The media stopped asking the question. They're like, well, then we just don't know. We'll just next topic. How's that? How's that for the free press? But I know why it happened. My hypothesis says why it happened. They have a pro-jihadi policy that has been perfectly consistent, and they're going to kill us. They're going to commit genocide here in Israel. I don't know when, but that's the plan. And what Donald Trump is doing right now is he's gaining time for the Ayatollahs, because the Ayatollahs could have been destroyed in the 12-day war. What Donald Trump has been doing since then is he's been buying time for the Ayatollahs to finish their bomb. That's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. So if they do drop the bomb on us, you make sure you share this video with the entire West, uh, because that could save the West. If Westerners, after the bomb falls here, understand that this was to enslave them and that now they're coming for them, and that my model predicted all of this. So now you can go read the rest of my model to understand what's going to happen to the West, right? Well, that might work. So keep this video, keep this video where you can then share it later on. Don't lose it. Anyway, that's my take for today. No, the U.S. will not attack Iran. Um, any hope that the U.S. will, or any expectation that the U.S. will, in my view, means that you have not understood U.S. policy. You're living in the managed reality that the controllers of the meaning system have created for you, and the beginning of the beginning of sanity for people who want to understand the geopolitical world is to abandon that model that doesn't explain anything that the U.S. does. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. I'll see you next week. I promise to. I promise not to add the wrong columns next time, and of course that will be corrected in the article we're going to be publishing. The article is going to be appearing very, very soon, and it'll have all of the documentation. You can check it. I encourage you to check it. I encourage people to try to refute me, to try to find an error, an exaggeration, anything in my work. And if they do find it, please let me know, and I will fix it. I don't want to say anything that's wrong, but this is the method. You have to try to prove me wrong, so that you find out whether you really should believe me. Okay. So even if you think I'm right, try to prove me wrong. That's the method of science. And so we're going to publish that soon. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you next week in our next live podcast, English live podcast on management of reality. Thank you for joining me.